Hi, Debbie here. Today I wanted to talk about things to consider when wanting to move your family overseas. The main things that you should be looking for for specific countries, or things to be looking for in international schools. You may be asking yourself, is it possible for me to move overseas? Now, right now you may have a family, you may have kids, and you might think, oh, my window of opportunity is over. I should have done this when I was single, etc., etc. But I'm here to tell you that that's not true. You can move overseas with your family and have an amazing experience. So things to consider when you're moving your family overseas. Big things are obviously pay. Can the salary support your family? And then other perks and benefits that you can find for international schools are your airfare being covered, or housing covered, or getting a stipend for that, and different things. So, when you're looking at overseas teaching jobs, it could be pretty daunting since there's jobs all over the globe. But if you have a family with kids, there are some countries that really you can kind of rule out, and there are other countries that are more family friendly that you should just be looking into. So that in a way will kind of help you weed out a lot of the countries to make it less overwhelming for you. When you want to look into schools or countries that are more family friendly, I would recommend looking at the Middle East or East Asia. Now, the Middle East may sound, scary or, whatever, but there are phenomenal places. For example, in Dubai, there are excellent international schools over there, and it's very safe and it's very modern. So, again, you can kind of research that as well. But the Middle East does have some really good schools, and it's a very family-oriented culture. So they would love to, squeeze your baby's cheeks or hug them and different things like that. In the East Asia, like China, Korea, Japan, those kinds of places, they really highly value teachers. Like I said in my first video, not saying that other countries don't, but because of that, they give very good benefits, very good pay for their teachers that you would be able to use to support your family. Now I'm going to kind of go with a list of different things, and if I lose track of the numbers, forgive me. But number one is housing. What kind of accommodations is your school going to offer you? Some schools, they offer free housing, meaning the rent is covered, the utilities are covered, all of that, which, to be honest, is kind of rare that they also cover utilities, but it does exist. The second thing for those housing options is they provide the housing, so it's free rent, but you have to pay the utilities. Like water, gas, electricity, your own internet, things like that, which it's not a big deal usually at the country. Or some schools, if they're kind of a lower budget or a smaller school, they may just give you a stipend or a budget for housing. For example, when I was looking at a school in Thailand, that's what they offered, and it sounded like a lot of the schools in Thailand offered the same thing. But they offered me, a certain amount, and that came to about a third of the housing cost so we would have to pay for 2/3 of the housing there. And so that was one of the big deal breakers for us that we said no to that school, because we wanted free housing. We wanted to be able to save when we went overseas and not just, surviving. So that's kind of an example of, countries like Thailand, Cambodia, South America, Spain. You can live, but you're not going to be able to save or really go exploring and do things with your family living in a cool country. So that's a huge thing to consider, is with housing, that could be a big part. Number two is your kids' schooling. Now, I have a baby who will be 1.5 years by August, so by the time we go overseas. And so you kind of want to ask your school what kind of childcare or schooling options do they have for your kids. Some schools, they do have daycares on campus. Sometimes they don't. So if they don't offer daycare for your baby, is your spouse going to stay at home so they can watch your kid? Or you would have to look at local options. So is there a daycare nearby that your school would recommend? Or can you find a nanny or hire a nanny for your kid? Some countries, nannies are very cheap, They can even, take care of your baby. They can clean your house. They can make food, whatever. So you can even research that. So you would want to ask your school about that, is what kind of options do they have for your baby? If your kid or kids are school age, do they get free tuition for the school that you're going to be working for? Typically, international schools do offer free tuition for up to 2 or 3 kids. So if you have more kids than that, then you're going to have to pay for that tuition. They might maybe give you a discount for working there. I'm not sure, but that can be kind of pricey. So you want to look into that. If you are teaching maybe English for a public school, I do know that for some countries they don't allow foreigners to be in public schools there. So you would have to be looking for a private school option for your children. And private schools can be very expensive. So that's something that to think about when you are asking the school that you're working for, what kinds of options do they have for kids? Or another thing that you can do is ask the school about the other teachers who have kids, and even ask them, hey, can I get their contact information to ask them about different parenting tips, or just information as someone that's already living there, to ask them questions. So those are things to think about for your kids and their schooling. Again, if they're babies, daycare or your spouse taking care of them, or different schooling options. Another thing to look for in international schools is airfare and the different benefits that they have. A lot of international schools, they will actually, and even English teaching jobs, they will cover your airfare of getting to the country and leaving the country at the end of your contract. But that's the caveat, is usually they'll only cover it for whoever's going to work. So if I'm going to work, they'll cover it for me, but they wouldn't cover it for my husband or my kid. That was the case for one of the schools I applied for, and that was kind of a big, another, thing. We're like, even for my kid, you won't cover it. So, but then all the other schools, they would cover it for me and my dependent, so me and my kids, because I'm working. Now, if both of you guys are working, then they'll cover for both of you and your children. It typically is for whoever's working for the school and then their dependents, so their children. So if your spouse is not working for the school, they won't cover them. Now, if you have a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract with a school, ask them if they do annual airfare trips as well. Not all schools do this, but it's a huge plus if you want to go back to your home country for a holiday or for summer break. So kind of ask them, I know you provide, or hopefully you provide airfare at the beginning of the contract and at the end of the contract, but do you also offer annual airfare? So that might be once in the summertime or once at Christmas, whenever you decide to use that. And when they do the airfare, how is that covered? Typically what they do is, I have to buy the airfare tickets first, and then when I get there, I'll show them my receipt, and then they'll reimburse me for that price. Some countries, what they do is I buy the ticket, and then when I get there, they just give me a set amount of money. So it may be, $1,200. If I found an airfare ticket that was $800, I get to pocket that $400, which is pretty awesome. So ask your school, how do they reimburse the airfare? Okay, number 3 is your work schedule. Some countries are more demanding with their teachers and their schedules than others. So when you're asking an international school, ask them, what would my day look like? How long are my classes? How many classes do I have? How many preps do I have? Also, especially with international schools, because it's a tight-knit community, they try to use their teachers in as many ways as possible. So what I like to ask my school is, what are the extracurricular activities, or what extracurricular things am I expected to do for my school? So a lot of times that could be, coaching or after-school clubs. And then some schools, they even require you to do things on the weekends. So especially if you have kids, do you want your whole time to be spent at school? Probably not. Okay, number 4 is health insurance. Does your school provide health insurance for you? And if they do, first off, is it a local health insurance or international? If it's local, that means you're covered when you're in that country. But once you go back to the States, let's say for holidays, your health insurance doesn't cover you. So you might have to have a different insurance while you're here for the holidays, or just not be covered. Or international health insurance does cover you wherever you are. So local or international health insurance. And then also, are your dependents, do they also get that benefit? So let's say your spouse isn't working, do they get the health insurance because you're working? Or because they're not working, they don't get it. But do your dependents get it? So do your children get health benefits or health insurance through you? I mean, honestly, health insurance, you may think, oh, well, we're pretty healthy, which that's how we are. We're pretty healthy. We never really go to the hospital. But if you're going to a foreign country, you have no idea what things you're going to come up with. If they don't cover it, that might be a deal breaker. Okay, number 5 is visas. So when you're working, obviously your school is going to get a visa for you to work, but can your spouse, if they're not? And obviously at the end of the day, one thing too to remember is when you're moving your whole family to a new place, a new country, new culture, you're packing up shop in the States or wherever you're from, it's going to cost money to do this. So don't expect, just because I'm going over to Korea and I'm going to make this much every month, I'm going to save a lot of money. That first month is going to be really hard because you typically don't get paid that first month right when you get there. So you're going to have to survive. In Korea, I know they pay on the 10th of the month and you only get paid once a month. So if you get there in August or July even for training, you're not going to get paid until mid-September. So you really have to budget, before you leave, hey, we're going to have this much money in our savings account so that when we get there, we can feed ourselves, get the necessary items that we need. Because with the housing, it's usually furnished, very simple. They might just have a bed, a desk, some kitchenware items that are in there. Sometimes if it's an apartment that a previous teacher lived in, they might leave some extra stuff for you. But you're going to probably have to buy some extra stuff. Maybe you'll have to get hangers or towels or, dish soap, groceries, those kinds of basic things. So you have to make sure that you're saving money for this trip. Now, I know I have to be working on this right now, is getting rid of our items here in the States. You can't just do it in one garage sale at the end, in June, right before you leave, or July, right before you leave. I have to be working on this right now where I am going through our items and I'm getting rid of things, looking on Facebook groups, posting pictures, going on Facebook groups, Craigslist, eBay, I don't really want to get into, but eBay as well, or just asking friends and family, hey, do you want this? Just take it, But that could be a way for you to be saving money, is selling your stuff. And also it's going to be less of a pain as you get closer to your date to leave of, things that you have to get rid of, and then you're just throwing them over to Goodwill and not making money to save for your trip. A bonus thing to think about is their funding for professional development. If you're going to international school, hopefully they will have this option for you where they give you a set budget for the year for you to be able to go to a conference or do an online course and things that will help you become a better teacher and hopefully get a better pay later in the future. And then, okay, so after all of this, you kind of, have weeded down the countries, you've weeded down the schools. How do you know that this school is legit and not sketchy? One website that I found was International Schools Review, and you go on there, you have to sign in. I think you even have to pay a little bit. It might be $20 or $40 a year. I just went ahead and paid for it because I wanted to see what real teachers were saying about the schools that I was looking at or even interviewing with. And then once you go on there, I am going to say though that you want to look at the dates of when teachers have written the reviews. Sometimes they're as old as 2014, which is 4 years ago. So the school might have changed. Schools change a lot, even within 2 years. So some of the schools that I was looking into, they were 2 years old. The reviews were 2 years old, and so after reading those, it gave a really good idea of the housing and food and living expenses and airfare and just all the things that the teacher liked or didn't like, and then they can write a paragraph about it. Now, if you can't find everything, or if it's not as updated on the international reviews or internationalschoolsreview.com, you can go ahead to Facebook and look for Facebook groups that are for that country. So really do your research. Once you've narrowed it down from country to a certain amount of schools, do your research on them. I hope this was helpful for you and all the things that you should be thinking about or asking your schools specifically to see if it's the right fit for your family. If you have any questions or any additional information or ideas or tips or advice, please leave a comment below and let me know what your experience is or what country you're going to, etc. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome day.